Welcome back, whisky fans. Welcome back, English whisky fans. We've got another Cotswolds Distillery release today, and this is really the counterpart to, I've got it down here, the counterpart to the Cotswolds Bourbon Cask. These are both cask strength, kind of limited edition releases. So whereas this one that I reviewed last week is the Cotswolds Bourbon Cask, this is the Cotswolds Sherry Cask. So similar presentation to the Bourbon Cask, although obviously sherry rather than bourbon, and we're told that this is full term matured in American and Spanish oak hogsheads and butts, seasoned with dry Oloroso sherry and Pedro Jimenez. So we've been told that this is matured full term, and I think that can really make all the difference. I think that you can quite often tell when a whisky has been allowed to fully integrate with the cask, rather than being flavour dipped at the end of the process. Often, even at a very young age, it does make a difference. As always with Cotswolds Distillery, it is natural colour, it's non-chill filtered, it is a no age statement whisky, which you kind of have to understand because they've only been around for just over 10 years. When I actually visited, they did have some 10-year-old casks from the very early days, but as I understand it, they haven't released anything remotely approaching 10 years yet. So this whisky here is probably going to be around about 5 years of age at the most. But as we saw with the Cotswolds Bourbon Cask, that doesn't necessarily mean a huge deal. Yes, it's going to taste young, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be bad. It doesn't even mean that it's going to be immature. New distilleries these days are pulling out all the tricks, and they're really making whisky which is much less of a work in progress and much more of a complete product, even at an early stage. And I think really they have to. There's so many new distilleries out there these days that to get noticed and get a following and get people to spread positive word of mouth, they really have to come out with something good right from day one. And spoiler, I think the Cotswolds have done exactly that. So cask strength, and with this one, with the last one, the Bourbon Cask was 59.1% ABV. This sherry cask is a little bit lower, it's 57.4% ABV, so still plenty of power there. This one is also slightly, well, quite a bit larger batch. It's around 2 to 3 times the batch size of the Bourbon Cask, which was only 2,500 bottles. This sherry cask, it's actually a larger batch of 9,900 bottles. So still just about small batch. That larger batch size may be partially because they've used a similar number of casks, but hogsheads and butts obviously hold a larger volume than an ASB bourbon cask. Although that difference is probably not going to make up the full difference that we're seeing in the batch size. But still, fairly small batch. And a lovely colour. Especially when you know that it's a natural colour, because we quite often get whiskies that look like that from White and Mackay and Lafroig and all of those horrible distilleries that pollute their whisky, and when they don't put that guarantee of natural colour on the label, it doesn't mean anything. When you're drinking a whisky and you have a strong suspicion that they've done the dirty on you and they've artificially coloured it, it doesn't matter what it looks like. And to be honest, when a distillery can't be bothered to give us that guarantee, it makes me not want to buy it. But this whisky from the Cotswolds, we know that as natural, so that colour that you're getting there is straight out of the wood. So let's get some in the glass and see what it's like. Something that I did forget to mention when I did the video for the Bourbon Cask is the corks that they're using at Cotswolds. I'm 99% sure, if you look at that, if my camera will cooperate. Oh, go on, you know you want to. Go on. I'm 99% sure that that cork is plastic. I think it's a synthetic one. So 10 out of 10 for innovating and giving us something that's kind of a little bit of a solution to the horrendous problems that we all occasionally have with natural cork products. Whisky. Tasting. Let's do it. Something else that I did spot on the label of this one. I'll show you a close-up of the bottle if my camera will cooperate once more today. I don't know if you can really see that. But it's actually on the label down there. Show you the whole thing. You can pause that and have a read. But down on the lower front label, it says distilled, blended and bottled in the Cotswolds, England, UK, which is fantastic. But I think that's bold using that choice of words on a single malt whisky. Describing a single malt whisky as blended is going to confuse some people, I think. Amazing from Cotswolds that it's all done in-house, because I have seen their bottling hall. It is done all done on site, but I think that choice of words is going to confuse some people, as I have confused some people in the past by describing single malt as blended or over blended. The truth is that almost all single malt is blended, in that it's multiple casks that are distilled at the same distillery, chosen and then vatted together, because vatting is an act of blending. But some people are going to read that and confuse this with a blended whisky containing grain whisky. Rest assured that that's not what this is. This is full English single malt. So, Cotswolds Distillery Sherry Cask, cask strength limited edition, on the nose. Actually surprisingly dry and challenging on the sherry front. It's a very dry and peppery, spicy sherry, mixing in really seamlessly with some lovely chocolatey, raisiny Pedro Jimenez PX notes. Getting orange flavoured wine gums on the nose of this one. Very fruity, orangey maltiness, very estery fruitiness. Very floral coming through from the sherry, as well as a little bit of a nuttiness, a nutty almond and peanut character. A little bit of leather polish. It actually reminds me quite a bit of some good Edredauers. It's got a little bit of that challenging, dry, spicy, cocoa, Edredauer sherry character, and I think it's got a little bit of that sort of trademark Edredauer soapiness as well. Slight struck match note, so perhaps a tiny little bit of sulphur. Polished oak, so like French polish note. Again, a little bit of youthfulness on the nose of this one, but very, very good. All the way through this one, there's very strong textbook sherry notes in this one. Good quality, dry, challenging sherry. Really is one of those kind of Christmas cake in a glass whiskies. Strong, nutty fruitcake note, which again makes it clear that this really is full term matured in proper sherry rather than being flavour dipped. So let's see how it tastes. Very chocolatey, and it's a dark chocolate as well, so like dark 80% cocoa, proper cooking chocolate, proper dark cocoa powder. The maltiness is starting to come through a little bit more on the palate of this one, so I'm getting some chocolate and grain notes, which is giving me a little bit of a chocolate hobnobs note. Really nice chocolatey maltiness, a little bit of a sweet hazelnut note creeping in. Probably my one criticism of this whiskey, the Cotswold Sherry Cask, is going to be that sherry cask is very prominent, and it does cover up a little bit of the Cotswolds fruitiness. That Cotswolds fruity malty character takes a little bit of a backseat this time, but it is always there. Also getting a little bit of that jelly sweet character on the late palate of this one, which again, as I was saying, I think is because it's coming through from that estery, fruity, new mate character. As for the finish on this one, I'm going to say medium long, moving on to dark chocolate coated raisins and a pleasantly bitter oakiness. So I think that you can really tell with this one that, as they said, that it's a mix of American and Spanish oak. It's a mix of hogsheads and proper sherry butts, and I think that you can really taste that. You can tell that there is some proper European oak gone into this one, and I'm also really, really glad that this is not a finish. This is very much not your typical overly sweet and simple sherry bomb, it would have been really easy for the Cotswolds Distillery or any other distillery to take some of their young whiskey, because it's what they used to do in the early days when cask finishing really became a popular kind of band-aid solution. You take either some very, very young whiskey or some not particularly good whiskey, slap it in a wet sherry cask until it comes out tasting like high-strength sherry, sell it and hope that no one realised what you've done. Cotswolds Distillery have not done that. They've put in the extra work and the extra cost of this one, the production value, and it's ended up with some real challenging and interesting flavours. And it is good that, although it's largely obscured, that the distillery character, that fruity estery malt, does still shine through a little bit. The malt doesn't entirely just hand over control to the cask. Even though there's less malt influence on this one than I would perhaps like, it's still a very skillfully blended whiskey with a really good balance of cask and spirit. So I have really been enjoying these two whiskies from the Cotswolds Distillery recently. I bought both of these when I was actually there in person. This sherry cask, I can't see that, and the bourbon cask. And if I get both of these out, I don't know, I was going to say you can tell which one I enjoy more. I'm going to have to hold those up so you can see them. But there's actually not that much in it. I was going to say that the bourbon cask one's gone down quicker, and it has a bit, but really they're both absolutely cracking whiskies. Like I said in my previous video, I think that the bourbon cask, if you bottle this at 46%, it would be a really great flagship malt for the distillery, and I think that this could, at a lower strength, to have more of a mass market appeal. This at 46% could really replace that signature malt. But I do also think that this one, as challenging and grown up as it is a little bit more difficult and not quite as user friendly. But I think that this whiskey here, providing you like your dry, slightly austere, slightly more challenging sherries, this is probably the best whiskey coming out of the Cotswolds Whisky Distillery as of 2023. And I'm very glad that Cotswolds Distillery, with both of these, and their peated cask, and there's a rum cask, and a founder's whatever, there's various ones of these, and a lot of their limited editions, they do seem to be going cask strength across the range, which I think is absolutely fantastic. My local distillery, the English Whisky Company in Norfolk, they used to do the same thing. Every time they brought out a new release, they would have a 46% version and a cask strength version, and lately they've been knocking the cask strength versions on the head, and I can kind of understand why they would do that, why a distillery would not want to offer too many cask strength releases, because it is a bold move to put your whiskey out there at cask strength, especially when you're relying on non-whiskey enthusiasts coming in, people who don't necessarily know or have a lot of experience with whiskey. To give them something that's nearly 2/3 pure ethanol is a bold move. But I think that the Cotswolds giving us so many cask strength releases, it really shows that they've got massive confidence in their product, and rightly so. So who is this Cotswolds sherry cask strength whiskey for? Who is going to enjoy this, and what is it similar to? Like I said before, I do think that it's quite similar to Edredar Caledonia. I also think that it's pretty close to the Arran sherry cask, in that it's a young, or bodega as they used to call it, or now call it, in that it's a young, well-made cask strength sherry bomb with that same bitter cocoa, orange and maltiness. So if you've enjoyed things like Edredar Caledonia or the Arran sherry cask, or even things like the Bunnahabhain 12 cask strength and the phenomenally expensive these days Aberlour Bunna, if you like any of those, then I think that you'll really love this one. Controversial opinion, I actually think that this whiskey from the Cotswolds is actually slightly better than some of those whiskies that I've just mentioned, and it's probably better value than some of them as well. I think that it's a real testament to English whiskey, to the Cotswolds and English whiskey in general, that this whiskey is so good already. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and it's shone a little bit of light on the Cotswolds Distillery. Let me know what you think of these ones and the rest of the range if you've been fortunate enough to try them. Thanks for watching and cheers.